Thanks. It's so good to be here. And you guys may know us as the God's Not Dead guys. In the last few years, we've been to over 100 campuses in North America and been to campuses in 25 different nations having these conversations about beliefs in God. And God's Not Dead, if you don't know, was originally written to answer the questions from the God test. So Dr. Rice Brooks had written the God test coming out of his dissertation research on the gift of the evangelist, developed a tool to help us do evangelism. And then when it came time, he wrote that book, God's Not Dead, to kind of answer those questions. And of course, the book, the movie, the song launched that. It's become a brand in itself that we use to open the door and do evangelism. But, you know, really it came back to the simple tool of the God test that we're going to go over with you today a little bit. So let me just show you a little bit about what we've done with God's Not Dead. You know, we've been to a bunch of campuses. This was North Carolina State here, big event. That's just some of what we do to kind of introduce ourselves. But again, I want to welcome you to the God Test Explained seminar. This paper version, how many of you have used the God test before? Raise your hand. Used it. Okay, so this paper version, if you've had that, over 200,000 of these have gone out and been being used. All right, in addition to that, and there are many languages as well. There's also an app version. Have you downloaded the app? Anybody download the app? All right, so just some stats for you to comprehend. The God Test app has been downloaded in every nation in the world. Somebody say every nation. Are we in every nation yet? The app is, just so you know. Millions of responses have been recorded. Millions of answers have been, how many questions have been answered, rather. In fact, it is the largest survey on God in the world, the largest. And why is that significant, Joe?
Well, I mean, I think sometimes we just say those statistics and they don't really make sense, like a big number. You're like, wow, that's big. You know, the largest survey in the world, it does primarily two things that I would mention, at least preliminarily. One is that we're going to teach you a method for sharing the gospel called SALT. It creates incredible context for evangelism. And if anyone in here has tried to do evangelism, personal evangelism, they know that that context to create a personal interaction is difficult. But then also, this call within every nation to reach the nations, you can gain confidence as you go out. Some of you may go to the nation. Some of you may go to a foreign country. You can know that the God test has been done in that country. Any of them. Because it's gone before you. So it's really trailblazed and been a calling card for every nation across the world for the last decade.
So that's why when we go out on campus, you're giving people a chance to add their voice to a global survey. And so, I mean, there's two things I found people want to hear. They want to hear their name and they want to hear their opinion. So this is an easy way to get a conversation going. In fact, I liken the God test to the bumpers on a bowling alley. Has there been bowling and your ball goes in the gutter? Okay, the God test puts the bumpers up. So the ball will get to the pins, which is the gospel conversation. It's going to funnel you in that direction. And now the first time I saw the God test years ago, about a decade ago, I saw it, and right away I knew this was something to be reckoned with. I'd been doing ministry now 30 years this year. We did a lot of surveys on campus, and people stay away from you in droves when you got a clipboard trying to do a survey. So, but this tool has been eye-opening because the way it navigates the conversation was very helpful. So I immediately grabbed it, went to a friend, went to train his church in North Carolina. I hadn't even done it yet. I just knew this was going to be good. And I got up there to teach it, and he catered some food, had a room full of people like this. And I said, I'm going to teach you this tool. It's going to be awesome. I hadn't even done it yet. And he took the God test, and he threw it up to me, and he pointed to a guy that was putting the food up, the caterer. I was like, do him now? Yeah. So I grabbed the guy and said, look, we'll keep paying you. Would you just come up here and let me demonstrate it with you? I demonstrated it to him live on the stage. He forgot everybody was in the crowd. Melted away, went to the questions, got to the end, and I asked if he would receive Christ, and he said, well, I have two questions I've never had answered. I answered them, and then he got saved. He said, what do I do now? And I just said, look, turn. That's your church right there. Got saved on the spot. That's the first time I ever used it. Yeah. Then I went on to lead more people to the Lord in that year than I had done the previous 20 years of campus ministry. I mean, we joke that it's so easy, we must be doing it wrong. I mean, it really is that simple, and we're going to help you today to make it that way. Now, I think I have this next slide, I believe, is Dr. Brooks explaining. When it originally came out, he made this video to kind of explain why the God test. So let's watch this video.
My name is Rice Brooks, and in developing the God test, my heart's desire was to see the average young person who is out on a high school or college campus, not only to be able to defend their faith, but to be able to actually share it confidently. I've been in youth ministry, campus ministry for about 30 years plus. I used to want to exaggerate that and make it longer. Now that I'm getting older, I'm keeping it at about 30 years, but 30 years plus. I started on a college campus, traveling the campuses of America, then went to Europe, ended up in Asia. And so even though I pastor a church and actually am a church planter, have a network of churches called Every Nation, the heart's desire always comes back, my passion rather, is to see people trained to defend the gospel, to know what they believe and be able to share it. I actually, in going back to seminary to kind of study evangelism, I started hearing these alarming statistics that 3% of churches in America or North America were growing through evangelism, and that 80% were plateaued and declining, 17% were just growing through people kind of, migrating around, going from church to church. So that really provoked me, this 3% figure. Why are only 3% of churches growing through evangelism? I think number one, it was just a lack of clarity as to what is the gospel. So we're going to talk about that in the next session, just helping people get a clear grasp of what is the gospel. If they're asked, that they know it inside, but can they really articulate it? Secondly, that many times they just need a tool. Thinking about Dr. Bill Bright, the founder of Campus Crusade, who developed the 4 spiritual laws. And in that tool, you would ask a person, have you heard of the 4 spiritual laws? And it was a tool that you would then go through and explain the fact that, here's the problem, man is separated from God, and here's the answer. Another man named James Kennedy, Dr. James Kennedy, developed Evangelism Explosion, which went around the world, still being used, as well as the 4 spiritual laws being used. But it was a memorized presentation. You ask a person, have you come to the point in your spiritual life where if you died, you'd go to heaven? And depending on their answers, then you learn through their training how to respond to those answers and then eventually present the gospel. The central question is, do you believe in God? And you ask that person, do you believe in God? And of course, we have on the cover all the different religions and ideas. We've even got Richard Dawkins, the author of The God Delusion. We've got different people here and symbols. So it's kind of the universe of ideas on the front of the cover. And it's just got questions. If a person says they believe in God, when you say, do you believe in God? If they say yes, then that's side B for believer. So you have 10 questions for them. You go through the God Test booklet. We'll show you this in a minute. You have 10 questions for them. If they say no, that's A side, atheist or agnostic. We have 10 different questions for them. And we're going to teach you how to ask these questions, to listen, and the power of that. What's exciting, just to give you a little bit of the story, that since developing this in 2010, I introduced it in Manila, in the Philippines at a conference, and it just took off. It's now in Spanish, being used all throughout Latin America. Here's a Spanish, Portuguese, English version. So you open it up and it has the questions not only in English, but C, Portuguese and Spanish. Here's French and German. Same type of thing. You've got it in English, but also French and German. Good for language study, by the way. Polish. Our Polish director there told me, he said evangelism is now fun because of the God test. It's also in Arabic. It's also in Chinese. I had a pastor told me the other day, he said, and he actually pulled his phone out and called his youth pastor from Lagos, Nigeria. And he told me, he said, in a matter of just a few days, they shared the God test with 850 students at the University of Lagos. He said all of them prayed to receive Christ, including 20 Muslims. Now, that does not happen like that all the time. That is definitely an exception. But they were kind of surprised that people were so willing to talk. And I think that's really the essence of the God test story, is that people want to talk about God. They're willing to have a conversation about spiritual things. We want to train as many as possible to have those conversations, to be confident in that. And so in this next segment, I'm going to talk about the strategy. I'm going to go through a little bit of why we're asking questions and the importance of listening, and then talk about the gospel. And then in the third segment, we'll kind of do how do you go through these questions and actually respond when it comes time to share the gospel.
Awesome. I wanted you guys to see that, just to see one of our co-founders and the developer of the God Test, Dr. Rice Brooks. It's been an honor to work with him as Joe and I get to do that, one of the founders of the movement, to keep that missional evangelistic fire burning. And he showed a couple of those trilingual versions. I put those together on my own. I just took initiative. I just thought, man, this thing needs to be in more languages. Had a Brazilian guy that played college volleyball with a friend of mine. We went down to Brazil and did some events with him. He said, man, this God Test is like an atomic bomb in my hand. Because he was all over the place with his faith, but it allowed him to channel it to that gospel conversation. So he let me do 2 sets of trilingual version. He had his own printing press, and we printed all those and brought them back to America. So you just be amazed when people have been doing this for a while and they see a good tool, they go, man, this is a tool I want.
I would add, Dr. Brooks referenced other videos. Those videos are available on the app as well. But by the goal of the end of this presentation is that you're actually going to be able to go out and use the God Test. That's the goal, is that you're going to have the confidence and the competence to go out there and actually use it and learn more about it as you go. But minimally, we're going to give you enough to get started as we move through the questions.
So you saw him talk about the paper version. It's been out forever. You've seen the app. But today, for the first time, we're unveiling to you the new God Test Expanded Edition. Now, each one of you is going to get a copy of this before you leave today, okay? Nice. This is Dr. Brooks' gift to you. He paid for it himself and printed them up. We got them here fresh off the press. I mean, literally got them here as soon as they got printed. It's about the size of a one-to-one book. Have you seen that? So now it has all the answers in there for you. Now, a word of how you do the God Test. You remember, you take it, right, and you're going to ask all the questions first, listen to them, and at the end you tell the story. You're going to get there, the gospel and the answers. Now today we're going to kind of go through each question quickly, highlighting some of the answers to the questions, but just know that's not how you would do it with somebody, okay? Also, now this book, because of the way it's been done, there are 3 ways you'll be able to use this book now. Number 1, you can use it for a personal study guide. You read it yourself and memorize the answers, master it, and you'll be able to use it whenever you do the God Test. You'll have those answers in your back pocket. Number 2, you could just use this as your new God Test. Use this when you go out and ask the questions, and then turn to the page and ask the question, and now you have the answers right there. Maybe you want to read through the answers to the person like you would with a one-to-one. Super simple. You can't fail that way. Just read what's already been written. Number 3, maybe it's a tract that you give away. Somebody reaching out to you and say, hey, I want to give you something. Would you just read this? They can just begin to self-discover on their own and come to faith, because now we've included the gospel and a lot more things in there. We've added 4 new questions, 2 on each side. We've kind of moved up, do you believe in God, as a central question to start with, and then if they say yes or no, they'll go to side A or B. And the events, we've been honing the questions over time, and so that's where we've got that. But first, we want to go over some foundational principles with you. Again, just some character, just to make sure that you're ministering. I'm sure you are, but ministering in the way of the Messiah. Isaiah prophesied that Jesus would not shout or cry out or raise his voice in the streets. Okay, so that's not. We all had guys like that on campus, right? Got sandwich boards, yell at people. God bless them, but I don't think that's the best way to really get your point across to people. Screaming at them that they're going to hell. Verse 3 says, a bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. In other words, we always see Jesus compassionate and kind to the sinners. Now, he rebukes the religious crowd, and I think sometimes we get our wires crossed. We love to be kind to the Christians and say, oh, you're sinning, don't worry about it. And then we go find the pagan, how dare you, and we're screaming at them. Because it's the other way around. We're kind to the lost people, gentleness and respect with them, okay? 2 Timothy, Paul tells us in his letter to 2 Timothy, he says, look, don't be quarrelsome, be kind to everyone. Again, gently instruct. And Peter, in his letter, says, always be prepared to give an answer. Of course, that word answer is apologia in the Greek, where we get the word apologetics. And it's interesting because it's used twice in Acts, where Paul is giving a verbal defense of the faith. So, in other words, are you able to verbally defend the faith? Do you have what it takes? You may know God, but can you show God to others? And hopefully you will today. So again, when you do that, though, you do it with gentleness and respect. All right, you heard him mention SALT method. What is that, Joe?
The SALT method is the delivery method for the God Test. And it's actually an incredible communication tool that if you incorporate it into your life, period, in any avenue, like you're going to find more success in your communication. But primarily, this is the way that we're going to communicate the God test to people. And it starts with the letter S, which we mentioned earlier about starting a conversation. And there we have like an acronym for it. If you get this and you start to work your communication through this framework, you're going to find a lot of success. People have had someone come out of the crowd and say, I think you know how to save my soul. Like, you know exactly how it works. No, you're going to have to initiate that conversation. And so using the tool and using the fact that it's the largest global survey, this is a great way to start the conversation. Now, asking questions, we do that for you. We actually provide the questions. And what's on you is just to finish the test without going into answering the questions first. That's very important, because when people feel that they're thoroughly heard and thoroughly understood, they're much more inclined to listen to you as you deliver the gospel to them at the end. And then listening, you just got to know how to listen. At the end of a conversation, a good gauge for that is to be able to repeat back to someone what they said. Has anyone heard that before? You can be able to repeat it back. And I would add one more, is that if you're not kind of like a little bit tired, you probably haven't listened well. You're not engaging your brain. So actually listening to someone talk, it's work, and it's going to yield some real fruit. And then at the end, being able to communicate the story of Jesus, which is the gospel. And we're going to equip you guys to memorize a great definition for the gospel by the end of this presentation.
People often leave a presentation like this and only remember one thing, and that's salt. And that's okay. If you do forget everything, this will help you. It's so simple, but yet it's very profound, because a lot of us, we get the answers in our mind, and we're talking to somebody, I gotta say something. And we don't first ask questions and get them to diagnose themselves what's going on. We don't listen. And so it's important to remember this acronym. This will help you. Just a quick testimony on this. Our friend, you guys know Bonnie Andrews, who was in our church in New York, just moved to North Carolina, Kings Park. He was an evangelist. He was sitting in the middle seat of Southwest Airlines. He busted out the God test and said, I want to start a conversation. Got going. He ended up leading both people to the Lord on both sides of them. Then he introduced them to one another. And when he left the plane, they said, yeah, we'll keep in touch. They exchanged numbers and started dating. Got married, called Bonnie up to come back. He did the wedding, got featured in Southwest Magazine, did a whole photo shoot. So it put him in the magazine.
That's real. You got to really let that sink in. They didn't even know each other. And that's just Bonnie magic. You'll meet Bonnie at some point in your life. That's incredible.
All right, so here we go. We're going to start going through. We don't have time again to go in depth today. You're going to get a copy of this, but we're going to highlight some of the answers here in this little booklet here. So on side A, again, that's the atheist or agnostic side. The central question is, do you believe in God? So if they say no, then the first question for them is, what are the main reasons you don't believe in God? Now, we basically, in all our travels in here, we've come up with about 4, to fix these animations here. There we go. We have 4 reasons why people don't believe in God that we found. Number 1 is evil. Maybe something's happened to them. Why is the living God allow evil in the world? We'll touch on that a little bit later. Number 2, they may say there's no evidence for the existence of God. They don't necessarily believe that there's any evidence. Number 3, they might say evolution and science have disproven the need for God. And finally, maybe errors. They say there's too many errors in the Bible for it to be considered the Word of God. So those are some of the common ones you'll have, and we'll have answers in the book on that. But then you'll move to question 2. Are you willing to follow the evidence wherever it leads? And this is an important question, because to believe in something without evidence is foolish. I often, when I was doing my grad school work, I was interviewing the president of the Muslim Student Association at Vanderbilt, and I did a little 3-question test with him where I asked him, I said, do you think that's important to have good reasons or evidence for strongly held beliefs? He said, oh, absolutely. And I said, okay, question 2, what are your most deeply held beliefs? And he gave me his beliefs about Islam. And I said, okay, number 3, what evidence or reasons do you have to believe that number 2 is true? And he was like, I don't know. And it put him in a crisis of faith, just that simple acknowledgement. So a lot of us will believe that. So you're trying to get them to kind of see, will they accept, because many will say there's no evidence, and then you'll give them evidence, and they'll say there's no evidence. Well, just because you don't like the evidence doesn't mean there's no evidence. You're trying to see, are they open to it? Does that make sense? I mean, our friend Frank Turek says it this way: if I could prove to you there's a God, right, would you follow him? They say no, well then they're not really seeking. They've already had their mind made up.
I would add, these questions that we're going to present to you, they're not just random questions that we made up. A lot of these questions are actually echoing the sentiments of great scientists, mathematicians, and philosophers. So are you willing to follow the evidence falls in the lane of one of the fathers of Western civilization, Socrates. So as you're engaging with a skeptic and you're trying to build common ground with them, you can have a common ground in the fact that, hey, we both believe in Socrates. We both understand that what he developed was incredible. I'm asking the same kind of questions, and that's going to help you build rapport with a lost person.
And so, again, that's the question, but then you don't want to interject yet when you're actually talking with them, but you will maybe ask clarifying questions. So will you follow the evidence wherever it leads? And you may want to ask them, what evidence are you willing to accept? Is another good one. Because many times they haven't thought about it. They want God to write their name in the sky. They have some absurdly high standard. He has to speak at this level of audibility. I want 10 manuscripts in the first century of Mark in Rome, as Bart Ehrman said. It's like, that doesn't exist in antiquity anywhere. So again, you're testing their level of heart. So, and you may want to help them. Look, when we talk about is there a God, when we're looking for the evidence of God, we're looking for evidence of an intelligent mind behind the universe. Help them to understand that's what we're looking for, and that's where you would begin to get into the various evidences, cosmological, teleological, all those types of things. Which again, if you get the God's Dead book, you've read it, it's all in there. But with this book, we're trying to condense it down, quick little snippets to make it easier for you, a little cheat sheet to go through. So if I wanted to talk on any one of these subjects, we could go for hours on that. So for sake of brevity, I'm going to try to keep moving. I see Dr. Igor Sopkowitz there. Wave your hand. There's Dr. Igor. Just if you guys haven't met Dr. Igor, is the newest member of our team. God's Not Dead team is a PhD in physics. So again, he has 3 master's degrees. Another guy that's a growing list of people who have forgotten more than I'll ever learn.
And to add a little context here real quick, Addison.
Yeah.
We'd like you to ask the questions all the way through to the end before you start to offer answers. But this is actually a caveat. We are looking for evidence of an intelligent mind behind the universe is something that you can drop into the conversation to add context for someone that is, a skeptic.
Right, and so there's credible stories in there that will help you. For instance, the biggest atheist of the 20th century was a guy named Antony Flew. He debated C.S. Lewis at Cambridge. He debated my professor Gary Habermas twice. He wrote about 40 books. He was committed to his atheism. Imagine spending your whole life writing that many books. Now, he followed Socrates, what would you say? Socrates, he had a statement that said, you must be willing to follow the argument wherever it leads. And willing to follow the evidence wherever it may lead. With the culmination of these various arguments, he, late in life, switched from atheism to theism. So, again, you're not giving evidence, again, that you're making up out of nowhere. This is evidence that thoughtful people, committed atheists, if they're truly open in their heart, and again, with this question, you're trying to see, is this person, are they open to hear that evidence? Question 3. Why is there something rather than nothing? As Joe mentioned, these aren't questions we're just making up out of nowhere. This has been the metaphysical question in the last 400-something years by Gottfried Leibniz, the co-discoverer of differential calculus. Is that what it is? I got the mathematician, Dr. Bouch, here. He'll let me know. But he posed that. Why is there something rather than nothing? Again, such a simple statement, but why? We don't have to be here. None of this has to be here, and yet here we are. The universe. You, me, the buildings, the chair. Why? Why is it here? And so this question has a lot of implications. Because we all have to come back to some kind of a brute fact. Whether you're atheist or believer, what is the brute fact? The thing that is just there, that just exists. Is it the universe? Is the universe just eternal? They thought that since Aristotle, from Aristotle to Einstein, they thought the universe was eternal. And yet Moses said, in the beginning God created. So somehow he had some kind of insider revelation that there was a beginning. And now, since Einstein, we have the science to say that, the universe did have a beginning. It's a theory now called Big Bang Theory, which is now the predominant standard of cosmology, that the universe did have a beginning. And that has profound implications. If what we see space, time, matter all came into existence at a period, right? Then whatever created space, time, matter had to be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, regress. It had to obviously be powerful because you're the power of a trillion suns, scientists say. And lastly, I would say personal. Because again, why is there something rather than nothing? That speaks to volition, an act of the will or choice. That is an attribute of personhood. And that's why we say God is personal. And we can deduce all that just from that argument. So this is where you're going to help walk people through. Question 4, and feel free to chime in anytime. I'm kind of giving a play-by-play for time's sake, but color commentary.
Yeah, I would just dive right in on this question. How do you account for the origin of life? One of the quotes we use in God's Not Dead all the time is from a mathematician named John Lennox. And he says that it's not so much about survival of the fittest, but arrival of the fittest. Where did life come from to begin with? What is life? Yeah, so, I mean, they'll try to say evolution kind of answers these questions, but really evolution is just about biological life. What happened before? Where did the first self-replicating molecule come from? And what about before that? Where was the mechanism to bring chemistry together? And why was everything so finely tuned at the Planck moment of the Big Bang, at the earliest quantum of time? It's already designed from the beginning to produce human life. These are the questions they can't answer. Because again, and maybe they can, they just don't like the answer that it implies. But whenever we see in the DNA, you got 3 billion lines of code in DNA, ordered and sequenced information. I mean, we're beaming radioscopes to the space with the SETI project, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. We're sending this information. How do we know if a message is coming this way? We're looking for ordered and sequenced information to come back. The very kind of information we find in the human genome. And every one of the 37.2 trillion cells in your body, we have these 3 billion plus lines of code directing your body what to do. This kind of information. And when you see a computer, we don't think that just happened. We see a program, we think a programmer. We see code, we think a coder. When I walk along the beach in Florida and I see my name written in the sand, I don't think, look what could have happened if given the waves enough time to do that. I think, who knows I'm here? Right? Because information always points to intelligence. So this isn't a God of the gaps argument where we're like, we don't understand anything, so we just insert God. No, we're looking at what the science says about the beginning of the universe, what the science says about information theory. And based on what we do know, we can see that the evidence begins to point in the direction of an intelligent mind behind the universe. And that's where you're trying to kind of lead the atheist agnostic you're talking with. Right, and at this point, we've mentioned the 3 billion different protein combinations. We're in the weeds, okay? Anybody else feel like we're in the weeds at this point? You're like, whoa, I came to an evangelism seminar, and this is a lot of science, and I'm a little confused right now. Hey, listen, this is what it takes to get on the same level with a skeptic, that they're working really, really hard to understand this that they have to go and discover this stuff. So, yes, this is complicated. Yes, it's a little difficult. Most of you are in college and you're studying difficult concepts and you're studying these hard things. Taking time to learn this and to lock in with someone as smart as Addison Tweedy is going to get you equipped to use the God test and be able to identify these people and change their lives. They're going to go from dead to life in Christ. And a lot of them are going to go there because you said, wait, there's 3 billion coded sequences in the DNA. I get it. And you'll see a eureka moment in a lost person's eyes and an atheist's eyes, which I've seen, which many of you have probably seen if you use the God test. And that's why we're putting in the work today in this session to understand these things. There's a little gut check before we move to question 5. You ready? Okay, let's keep going.
That's a good point. Many of us, the gospel makes us do things we don't necessarily want to do. I know people that had Muslim roommates, and because of that, they had to study Islam, learn Arabic. And it's like, why? Well, I had a Muslim roommate. I was going to reach him, so I had to start learning about his faith. If you're on a college campus, you have the postmodern worldviews, you have the scientism worldview. You have to start studying those worldviews and learning them to answer the questions from your professor and your classmates and teammates that you're getting bombarded with. And so hopefully the love of God compels you on your campus to discern and discover these answers. Take a little time to do this. I didn't necessarily want to do this either, but I found myself as an evangelist on campus. I got to start figuring these answers out, right? So you dive into it, figure it out, and we're trying to condense it down for you to make it easier and easier. And I'm not trying to say this in a demeaning way at all. I mean, I'm not necessarily the smartest guy, but I know how to read. And you can read and learn a lot. I've had friends like Dr. Gabe back here before he was a doctor. I mean, smart people challenge me all the time. But now look at a guy like Joe. He's a happy-go-lucky kind of guy. And yet but I'm saying, I've watched Joe.
He's smart.
Again, I'm not putting you down at all. But I mean, I'm just saying, this guy has taken the God test. He looks for the hardest atheist on campus, and he goes for it. I'm gonna get one. I'm gonna get one. He goes, I'm ready to get that story, that testimony. And every time he learns what he did wrong, what he did right, and he's practicing, and he's figuring out guys to the Lord, and I'm figuring it out. And he's just, the more he reads these books and we do these events, he's learning more and more and more, and going, look, he's not building himself as this big scholar doing this stuff, and yet he is effective just to like sow those seeds on every campus, before our events.
So to speed it up, we're now purpose of the meeting now. Purpose.
Number 5, do you find any ultimate purpose or meaning in the universe? Okay, this is universally accepted. That's a basic need of all humanity, to find meaning and purpose. And if you take an atheist position, then they will agree, all these great atheist philosophers, that really it leads to nothing. If there is no God, then really everything is meaningless. There is no ultimate purpose. And so they have to kind of assert their own meaning or purpose in their life. Yeah, my purpose is to make money. My purpose is to win games. My purpose is whatever. But that's really not an ultimate purpose or meaning. So what is it about us that feels like we have to live with some sense of purpose, unless there's somebody who purposed us and had designed us with great intent? So again, you're trying to get this person to doubt their doubts and think that way. So ultimately, because God exists, and only if God exists, is there any ultimate meaning and purpose in the universe? Now, question 6, does evil exist? Again, people say, hey, there's no God. Well, does evil exist? And people think that somehow because of evil, that therefore there is no God. But really, if there is no God, there is no evil. Because you have to have a standard by which you're going to measure between right and wrong. C.S. Lewis said, I call the line crooked, but how could I call a line crooked unless I knew what a straight line was? So all of you guys are on campus, right? I should just drop the mic and walk away right there, I guess. Yeah, I wish I came up with that. That was C.S. Lewis. That was like when I told my son Addison about Pascal's wager when he was 10. He goes, that's amazing, Dad. Did you come up with that? I said, no, that's Pascal's wager. He goes, wow, well, he's really smart. I said, well, thanks. All right. But again, smart people have gone before us and given us these great lines, crooked lines, straight lines, C.S. Lewis. But look, everybody's got something that's unjust, right? Get rid of my student loans. I mean, everybody has some cause, Me Too movement, something on campus that they're railing against. I go, well, why is that wrong? Why is rape wrong? Why are you stopping Rape Week? Stop Rape Week. Why? Why is rape wrong? I might just start asking, where do you get morality from? What's evil? We all have something we think is immoral, wrong. I mean, listen to the language people use. Anytime someone says something's better, I'm trying to improve, we're trying to human flourishing, we're trying to be progressive. Progress towards what? Flourish how? Improve what? What's the standard? We speak in a way that we know there's something we're striving towards, some standard. In other words, we have, as C.S. Lewis again says, we have this moral imperative that we know we did not create, nor can we escape from it, that presses on us, right? This is the moral argument. So again, you're looking at the evil, and ultimately you're going to get to, my little throwaway line here is, just that the existence of evil doesn't indicate the absence of God from the world, but the absence of him from our lives. So we have to have God, right? The fact there's evil shows that there is a God. But why is there evil? Well, part of it's because we all make choices to not choose the highest good, God. He's that standard of good. Anything less than that is what we call evil. So
we're talking about philosophy, but let's make it a little bit like science, and the speed of the universe expanding, it's going faster. Let's go a little faster through these questions so we get the B side as well.
True. Okay. No,
some of you got that joke about the universe is expanding really quickly, and it's speeding up. So we're going to try to speed up as well.
We do want to have
to
time for Q&A at the end here. What is the basis of your morality? So again, you're trying to find out what's the basis of our morality. Is it a social construct? Just sort of you feel, is there really a morality at all? Or is it just really everything is preference? I prefer not to mass murder people, but maybe you don't, I like chocolate chip ice cream. Maybe you don't. It's like, is it everything just a purpose?
Drastic differences there. Wow.
Well, I mean, it gets down to that, Everything's just a preference, or is it really right or wrong? Who are you to say that the Germans said, well, our leader told us to exterminate Jews, so how can I go to jail for that? How can you try me for that? Unless there's some transcendent moral law, right? The Nuremberg trials, they said, hey, there's a higher law you should have obeyed rather than just German law. So how do we adjudicate between nations if something's wrong? If it makes right in this survival of the fittest world, or is there a higher law or higher morality?
And even if somebody tells you that you can't have there is no moral basis. Well, guess what? That's a moral basis because they're saying you're wrong. So it's an infinite regress.
Yeah.
Continuing
so if there's
on.
something wrong everywhere, it points to this transcendent moral argument. Now here, the next question, do you think human life is special compared to animal or plant life? Again, people because when you try to deny God, then you have to kind of reduce humans to just mere animals. I'm just following my instincts and, we just got to do whatever we got to do. I mean, I got urges, you know what I'm saying? And it's like I just got an urge. Like I have urge to go to the bathroom, but I don't lift up my leg or urge to get married. Well, you're walking around just led by your urges. So we have the capacity to make decisions, to think about our thoughts. Humans are different than animals and plants. When an animal kills another animal, it's not a crime scene, okay? It's like a Geico commercial. It's just what animals do. So we know instinctively when this happens, but yet when a human does it, we go, wait a minute, that's wrong. It's wrong. I mean, so again, you're pointing this out to people. Question 9, is there life after death? This has haunted, people throughout history as people are hoping for something beyond their current misery. But look, if God exists, then you exist. And if your true self is not just your physical body, then the hope of life after death is real. So here you might want to get into, the difference between the mind and the body and how what you think about can actually redo your brain neural networks. And so we can see that the mind and body are not, the mind and the brain are not the same thing. And so if there is an immaterial aspect to us, we're not just reduced to our physical being. So again, these are little things you're doing. You're just in inception, planting the doubts inside the atheist or agnostic. And the last question, you're just trying to say, like, how certain are you that God does not exist? This is an important question because you're trying to find out how committed they are to their atheism or unbelief. And technically, anything less than a 10 would mean that you're technically an agnostic, not an atheist. And, because they don't have to have 100% certainty that God doesn't exist. What you're going to find is people don't have 100% certainty that God doesn't exist, so therefore, technically, they should be more open-minded. I mean, even Richard Dawkins said on a scale of 1 to 7, he was a 6 that God doesn't exist. So even those committed atheists, he kind of holds back a little bit. So really, because otherwise you have to know everything.
And even recently, Richard Dawkins, if you know the name, he's a very famous atheist, has even come out and said, I'm culturally Christian because of some of the crises in politics and immigration in UK. So he's playing a double standard there as well. He likes the system, but he doesn't want to believe in it. He's kind of coloring himself there.
So one of the points to get across here is just that all you have knowledge about, Christianity, knowledge about science, there's an element of faith in all those things. And faith in God is not faith beyond a possible doubt, but beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, maybe we're just, had memories implanted in us 5 minutes ago and this didn't really happen. Maybe we're not really here. You hear all kind of crazy stuff out there. But we're not trying to say beyond a possible doubt. We're trying to get people down to what's reasonable, just like in a court of law. Okay, you can't just say God doesn't exist. You have to propose, well, then how did we all get here? Why is there something rather than nothing? Where did the first life come from? Make them answer the tough questions. And that's what asking these questions does. It really stirs them up to realize, hey, well, maybe my atheism is not as solid as it was. And you might want to ask them, look, we got to the end of the side A here. What would you say before we started this test? What was your level of certainty before the God test as opposed to now? Has anything we've said here moved the needle, right? So, and then maybe if they're open to it, you could move right into side B, right, and begin to go through the questions there. So we'll jump right into side B. Again, central question is, do you believe in God? They say yes. So you might ask them, well, what are the main reasons you do believe in God?
That's an important question. That's a very important question because a lot of times we don't even ask that of ourselves as Christians. We don't ask what the main reason we believe is. And many of us, and I include myself in this, grew up and really only had a tacit knowledge of Christianity. I had received it a little bit by osmosis, and I accepted it because I saw the order in it and the beauty in it, and I accepted it and had a very young, very undeveloped faith without a lot of reason. But then as I began to look at my faith more seriously, as many of you guys probably did in college, then you begin to actually have a reason for your faith, because real faith is based on evidence.
Boom, that's right, based on evidence.
Boom.
All right, so question 2. What is the biggest challenge to your faith? Again, these are like a doctor. You don't go to the doctor and just go, here's some pills. When you come to him, he asks you, where does it hurt? When did you injure it? What were you doing when it happened, right? So he knows how to diagnose it. The God test is letting them self-diagnose. As you're asking the questions, they're basically telling you how to preach the gospel to them. Even if maybe they said, I believe in God. I was looking at Barna the other day. It said 85% of Americans believe in God. But then 53% of those people say, God is an impersonal force. So you can't just go, oh, they believe in God. This is great. You're going to begin to ask other questions about their faith here and begin to see, well, maybe it's not, maybe it's a Hindu God. Maybe it's, whatever. So you got to ask these other questions. Now, we find challenges to faith. Maybe they're a believer, but they're struggling. So maybe they have some doubt. Maybe they have some intellectual doubt. Just some questions that are unanswered. Well, explain Genesis to me? Or what about some genocide my professor was talking about? They may have issues they're trying to struggle with that you can help untie. Maybe it's just emotional doubt. They've had some pain happen to them. A loved one died. They've experienced evil firsthand. Or maybe it's some moral doubt. There's a great incentive to deny the existence of God if you're living in sin. So maybe it's just a moral doubt they have there. Here you're looking for claims of 6 blind men and an elephant. You've heard this before. Leslie Newbegin went to India and they said, oh, we're all, look at the same thing. One feels the side of the elephant and they think it's a wall. One the tail and they think an elephant is a rope. They each think it's a different thing, but really they're all looking at the same thing, right? So he's trying to deny this exclusive claim. But the problem with that story is the narrator is telling it from an objective reality point that there is actually an elephant, okay? And we're just saying the same thing. There is someone that gives us objective reality, and we're saying, well, that's Jesus, right? But when you say that all paths lead to God, help them to see that really that is an exclusive claim to knowledge. All paths lead to God. Well, how do you know that, right? So we all have exclusive beliefs.
Yeah, and I'd reiterate that you're starting from a foundation on the B side of someone that already believes in some sort of God, and you're trying to add specificity to that. And like he said, there is some incentive, especially with people that are in what they know, like they're morally compromised. They know that they're in a state of sin, and they've already recognized that in their life. So they're incentivized to reject the specificity of God, this personal God, because they don't want to obey what he says. And if we look at ourselves, that's where most of us came from. And I mean, many of us came from. Once we understood there was a moral obligation on us, we wanted to reject that God that was putting that moral obligation, but we couldn't reject him all the way because it didn't logically carry for us for that to work. So we kind of accept him, but he's kind of this fuzzy, kind of out there God. Is that making sense? Yeah.
All right, question 4. How would you describe God? Again, now they're going to describe to you what they think about God. Is he a mean old man? Is he trying to smite them? Is he just an impersonal force?
Is he bald? Does he have good hair? Yeah,
So you're trying to figure that out, right? So and then when you finish and you go back, you can kind of fill in where they're missing. So you're going to want to go back and fill in, explain to them that God is a creator, and that God is love. And many times people may say, oh, God's love, and he just wants us to, be nice and get along with people. And so you want to come in and maybe balance that with also God's loving, but he's also holy, right? And he has a standard of righteousness. And of course, that's on the cross, his love and his righteousness meet. So sin has to be punished, right? But
I was going to say as well, sometimes, and I've used this before, someone can go, God is love. And you go, great, you know some of the Bible too. That's in 1 John. But let me tell you a little bit more about this God of love. And you can add clarity at the end, obviously. But again, you're looking for routes to get to the gospel as you move through these questions. A lot of these can be kind of like exit ramps into a gospel conversation from this main conversation about the existence of God.
And no matter what they say, this next question really gets them. Because how would you describe God? He's this. Okay, great. Let me ask you this then. what does God expect of us? Just to walk old ladies across the street, or not to murder anybody, or what. They'll have whatever they say in their mind, right? But then, let me see. Oh, that's on the next one, yeah. Okay, so ultimately what he expects of us is to keep his commandments. And of course, his two greatest are love God and love others. And so the whole law and prophets hang on these two commandments. I like to think of it like hanging a picture, right? If you take the nail out of the wall, that picture falls. So everything in the scripture, Jesus said, hangs on those two commandments, loving God and loving others. So you're going to kind of move into question 6, which is, well, how are you meeting those expectations on a scale of 1 to 10? So no matter what they said, even if they don't believe in God, or they have some perverted view of it, deviated view, they have whatever standard in their own heart, are they even meeting their own standard? And this is where we all know we fall short. I know I shouldn't cuss. I know I shouldn't talk bad to my mom. I know I shouldn't have looked, on the person taking the test next to me. Oh, I know I shouldn't have. We all have something we know that we're just not even meeting the very standard that we have ourselves. And so when you're talking to them, you're going to begin to help them understand this separation between the holiness of God, who he is. Here's man. Religion is always man trying to get to God. I got to do more, say more, give more, go more. I got to do all these things. But Christianity is God coming down to man. He condescends to us, becomes man and walks among us. I like how Spurgeon said. He said, religion is spelled D-O, do. But Christianity is spelled D-O-N-E, done. Right?
Bars. Come on, bars. That's good. And
Question.
I would add that you want to do this with candor, and you can do it with a little bit of humor if that's your way. But again, you're helping someone realize that they're living in a contradiction. Their wires are crossed here, because they say God expects something and they know that they're not doing that. So they're living in direct rejection of what God wants for them. And so that's bad news. So you don't want to come in with this news like, and some sort of like kind of very plain and straightforward. Yep, you're breaking the rules. You're going to hell. You don't want to do that. And you especially don't want to come in with like a preachy moment, like you're going to die. You're going to hell. Like, if a doctor came in and was like, guess what? You got this disease. Yeah, and the nurses were doing that. Like, that's not, you want to do this with candor, and you want to bless them, and however you can, and it can be kind of personal how you approach this, but you want to be able to help them see this gently and lead them through this, because they're going to, at the end of this moment, this is where I see a lot of people, it clicks for them. They go, oh, wait, yeah, you're right. You're right. I'm not living for God, and I know what he wants from me, and I'm running for him. You encounter those people on campus every day. So this is a big, big question. It's a very big part of the B-side, and it helps me all the time.
I like to use a lot of humor personally, and I always get people, I kind of make fun of what they say back to them. They're always like, man, when you say it like that, man, it really sounds bad. Or like, once I hear myself say it out loud, I realize maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. So, but many times people have something in their head, and when you get them to verbalize, it runs off the cliff and realizes he's not really standing on anything firm. They have a whole belief system that's just, their feet are stuck in midair. So question 7, do you believe in heaven, and does everyone go? Again, now you're looking for belief in afterlife. What do they think about the afterlife? It's important to understand what they think that happens after death. And of course, Matthew 6:9, our Father in heaven. The Bible's clear that heaven exists. Jesus says, I came from heaven, I'm going back to heaven. So, you want to see that. And then, of course, does everyone go? What's their belief about whether or not they get in or not? Jesus said, look, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. So there is a heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. So now question 8, you're getting into, well, do you believe you'll go to heaven? Why or why not? So now you're looking at what the basis is of their hope to get in when they die. In other words, where is the weight of their trust? A lot of even believers say, oh, I believe in Jesus, but yet, because I've done it, I have more good than bad. So where's that way? Are they leaning on what they did, more good than bad, or are they leaning on grace, done, D-O-N-E, what God, the finished work of Christ on the cross?
And if you're a football player, this is the red zone. This is where you're landing the plane. You're getting ready to help deliver the gospel to these people. And this is going to be important that you approach this and with candor, with trust, and you're opening it up really gently.
So in the previous God test, people would get to the end and we would coach you to then ask them questions and present the gospel and get them to commit. But we found that so many people would just falter there and struggle. So again, this is where the guardrails go up. Now we're going to, I'll say, make you do it. We're going to make it. So that's one of the questions. Your next question is, have you heard and understood the gospel? Colossians 1:6 says the gospel is bearing fruit and growing throughout the world, just as it has been doing among you since the day you heard it and understood, truly understood God's grace. So once you hear and understand the gospel, it begins to work in your life. So believing it means you simply put your trust in it. And if you're already a Christian, you have to read the gospel to you. Boom. You're going to have the gospel right there, and you can begin to explain the gospel to them.
And we cannot stress how important it is for you to take a definition like this and memorize it and master it.
Yes.
And get it in your bones, in your head. It's bouncing off the walls. Okay, we memorize things like the Pledge of Allegiance and all of these things. This is the most powerful statement that you will keep locked in your memory for life. Practice it, memorize it. This is your script.
Take a picture.
This is where you're going with this entire conversation. If you leave with none of the answers locked in your head, leave with the gospel in your heart. Okay?
So we will take a minute and go over this. We went fast, but we want to slow down right here to make sure, again, that you memorize and master this. The gospel is the good news that God became a man in Jesus Christ. Okay? So he is God. He became a man in Jesus Christ. Many religions will say Jesus was a great person. He was a great teacher. Maybe he was a prophet. But, prophets said, thus saith the Lord. They would preface their comments, I'm speaking God's words on behalf of him. Hey, thus says the Lord, thus says the Lord, thus says the Lord. Jesus never said, thus says the Lord. Jesus said, truly I say to you, because it was the Lord speaking. He was indeed God in human flesh, the hypostatic union, 100% God, 100% man. So he lived the life we should have lived. What does that mean? It means he lived perfectly. He perfectly obeyed the moral law. Now, he broke a lot of religious laws, but he perfectly obeyed the moral law. And again, I told you about how you see, God up here and man here, right? And we fall short. So this is where God had to come down, become a man, and live that perfect life for us. And because he did that, then he was able to die the death we should have died. He was that propitiation for our sins, because the wages of sin is death. So he did that in our place so that we don't have to do that. And 3 days later, he rose from the dead. Now, why is that important? Well, because rising from the dead, it says, is what proved he was the Son of God. So how do we know we should trust Jesus, that he was indeed the Son of God? He rose from the dead. That should get your attention. I've never seen anybody raised from the dead. That usually the people I know that die, they stay dead. So him coming back from death was a shocker. It changed people. So it's launched the whole movement. Christianity exists because a man rose from the dead and people told the story and then went back and began to write down the stories of Jesus and write letters. Christianity was launched before we ever even had a New Testament. Christianity already existed because this man rose from the dead. The resurrection is what created the New Testament Bible that we have today. And now he offers the gift of salvation and the forgiveness of sins to anyone who repents and believes in him. And to repent, that simply means to turn. And you can't turn from something without necessarily turning to something else. So if you're walking in your way, I would do what I want to do, when I want to do it, how I want to do it, who I want to do it with, and you turn from your sin, and you turn to faith in God, like flipping a coin. One side goes down, the other side goes up. Now I'm turning to faith in God. And no matter where you are in life, God is right there. We kind of joke sometimes, it's like having Siri trying to get somewhere, and you may get off track, but Siri's not ever there going, you stupid idiot, you took a wrong turn. Siri's not out there judging you. I mean, maybe you have an Android, it'll judge you, but I'm just kidding. No, but Siri doesn't judge you. It just says recalculating. Gives you another route. No matter how far off base you get, there's always, you just turn and God's going to be right there. He's going to be right there. But you got to be willing to turn and receive that and believe in him. Again, it's believing in him and his finished work on the cross and not what you do, whether good or bad. Hey, I'm a pretty good person. I'm a Boy Scout, got straight A's. Great. You're going to hell. I'm a mass murderer. Good. You join him on the cross. The standard is perfection. You're in or you're out. So Good. Drop that mic again. All right. So last question now. Are you willing to put your faith in Jesus Christ? Bring it. You do this gospel conversation, these moments, because you're trying to get them to a point of decision. So don't leave without asking that question. Are you willing to put your faith in Jesus Christ? And in light of all that we've said, sometimes I may ask them, do you have any other questions about what we've talked about so far? No, I don't. Well, that first time I did it, the guy said, yeah, I have 2 questions. It was just simple stuff. He just never had met a Christian before, so he didn't know. I gave him 2 simple answers, and he said, okay, yeah, I'll trust in Jesus. And then you're like, what? Seriously? I mean, so you can't believe it's that easy. When Joe and I go on campus sometimes, I love it because I would train Joe at first and now let him loose. And now when he's doing it, I just take a picture. And we were at University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, and this kid had was it a Muslim dad and a Mormon mom? Or something? This kid was all mixed up.
Yes, he did. His name was Joseph, by the way.
Yeah, his name was Joseph, yeah. And so by the time he got that point, he was like, you know what, I'm so confused with all this going on. This makes so much sense. I would love to serve Jesus. And Joe's like, wow, am I doing it wrong?
No, totally. This is advice to go all the way to the end every time and ask this question, because I have gotten to the end of conversations. I did not feel like this person was inspired. I'm getting to the end going, okay, I'm going to just deliver the gospel. We'll see what happens. Okay, you want to accept Jesus? And they go, yes, very much. I'm like, did you not hear how bad I did? Like, no, I want to. I've had those. I've had the other ones. I've had the opposite. But the key is to finish the test. And I would steal a line from Dr. Brooks, and I would say every one of you should steal this line as well, because you're going to ask a lot of questions. And we've asked 10 questions in a row, and maybe you still have questions for me, but maybe God has one more question for you. What are you going to do with what you know so far? Time is limited. I'm right here, right now. I'm in your life. When God wants to say something to someone, judging from the evidence in the Bible, he generally sends someone to say something where you can close the deal. I think this is it. And then as they make a commitment to Jesus, you're making a commitment to walk that commitment out with them. Yeah?
Again, this is very doable. These tools are available for you. You can contact us. Our information, we can get you graphics to help you do campaigns on your campus, whatnot. And if you have any questions...
Yeah,
want you to stay here and get a
Addison,
copy.
what I'm going to do, just a second. Hey, thank you guys. Appreciate that. Give them a little hand clap here they did a great job. So anyway, what this will do is, again, it can function as your own little personal trainer. So all of the little anecdotes from each of the questions, they're doing their best to squeeze that in one moment. So you've gone through 20 questions today. So there's no way you're going to remember that. So this just becomes a script. So look through it, and what I've done is I get to hang around a lot of smart people, and so over the years, I've taken the best wisdom and answers that these smart people have said and condensed it down into a way that you could use it in a conversation. Many people will buy books from smart people and they put them on their shelf, but when they get into an actual conversation, they can't remember what that smart person said. They may not have even read it thoroughly. So what we're trying to do is to give you usable information. So there's not very much, each answer to the questions are 300 to 500 words, but I measured those out to say these words are important and they are useful because of conversation around the world. So I've sat in front of atheists from Iceland. I could tell the stories of being in front of audiences, scientific organizations, and no question that we've ever heard will stump you if you know the answers to these questions. Okay? So this is what it's designed for. Usually when you go out to witness, you feel like you've got to have all the answers. And what if somebody says something to me that I don't know the answer? I'm not afraid of that. But with the God test, it's reversed. We go out with the questions. And so when you have the questions and you ask the questions and you've also studied the answers, you put yourself in the best place to minimally survive that conversation. And if nothing else, when I get to the end of a conversation, and if atheists have given me all these great arguments and I don't have time to go through it, sometimes I'll just say, look, that's very good. I wish I had time to talk about that. I said, but by the way, have you ever heard the gospel? Do you even know what that is? They go, well, I think it is. I said, well, let me explain it, because I think if minimally you'll be a better atheist if you know this, because you don't really quite know what it is you don't believe in. So let me explain this a little more carefully, because you're rejecting something that really isn't true. You're rejecting your idea of what it is, but here's what the gospel is. And I explain that gospel definition. You know, it's kind of funny. You know, at the end of the Gospels, when it says that the disciples were closed in and Jesus just appeared in the room, it's like he walked through the wall. And that wasn't because Jesus was less real. When you flew on an airplane here and you went through a cloud, the cloud was less real. The heavier airplane went through that cloud. And so Christ, the Creator, walks through a wall that's almost like walking through a cloud to him. And he appears in front of them. And that's what the gospel does. No matter how big the wall is that someone has, in the end, the gospel can walk through that wall. Atheist brother named Ben was in law school at SMU. His hobby was harassing Christians. And when I came home, he actually came home that weekend. He told his sweet mates, he said, I'm going home to get my little brother out of this born again thing. So here comes my brother with all these questions. And really, I just did what I've learned in this whole exercise, is to ask questions and listen, and then figure out what is the missing piece that he's forgotten. And I did that. I just kind of pulled the loose thread that my brother, in all this formidable opposition to God, and on the weekend that my brother came home to talk me out of my faith, we baptized him. And I remember when he came up out of the water, he said, you haven't really answered my questions. He said, but I think I've been asking the wrong questions. So what we've done is build this so that you have the best chance to have an intelligent conversation, a civil conversation. I don't have to argue. I don't have to quarrel. In fact, sometimes it's just I'll ask the questions and I'll just walk off. It's like he referenced the movie Inception. I plant the question in their head. And those questions, sometimes a great question has more power than a statement that you make. Because sometimes we're trying to answer questions that people aren't even asking. So once a person begins to get curious and they really begin to say, wait a minute, I didn't know that. And they begin to seek. Those who seek find. So anyway, look through this. Again, this is our gift to you. On the back it says engage resources. This is so fresh that we don't even have it up on the website yet. So next week it'll be up there. If you want to order the paper God test, you can order those there. Very cheap. And if nothing else, you can download the app. Burning question. Stand to your feet. First 5 that stand up.
Okay, my friend here in the middle was the first one I saw, and I'll just work my way back. Can you state your name for everybody and your question?
Hi, my name is Danielle. You're Dr. Rice Brooks, right?
Yes.
Okay, I was just making sure. One thing that I've really struggled with is getting discouraged. So what advice would you give to a missionary, campus missionary, like someone I'm aspiring to be? What advice would you give me to encourage me from getting discouraged by people who completely disregard or kind of pose questions I don't have the answer to that make me doubt myself and my intentions?
Yeah. 2 things. Number 1 is you memorize and you master the message. I'm so convinced that the gospel is really true. It's true. In other words, there is a God. Christ died in history. So that makes it public truth. So it's not just private truth. Because I'm so convinced that the gospel is true, then I understand the psychological reasons that people don't want to hear it. Maybe they think of the bad pastor that they had. I just talked the other day to the New Orleans Saints. I'm not responsible for the record, but a friend of mine who's in our church, in fact, it's because of their desperate situation that he said, come on in here and talk. Pastor James, my partner in ministry, is going to be with them as they play Tampa tomorrow. But it's funny how that the reasons people give me when I start asking them are mostly emotional reasons. It's the existential crisis. They haven't really pondered the intellectual side like some of this is. That's number 1, is just be confident. Number two, when I got saved, I just started reading the New Testament. I read it over and over again. And so that's what I tell people all the time when they say, I've been at this thing 45 years in ministry chapters. Now, I don't say you have to do that. I'd say if you read it every month, then that's going to be good. Joe reads it twice a month, right there. I don't know how much Addison does, but I know Joe and I, he reads slower, once a month. The point is that if you read, as I read through the New Testament over and over again, then it's my script. Scripture is my script, and I'm so convinced it's true. So I'm convinced that the gospel's true, and I'm so convinced that what Jesus said is true, that then other people's failures and sins and everything else like that all fit in because the Bible tells you that's what's going to happen. The Bible tells you they're going to hate you. And these TV evangelists that go, if you don't love, if you put your hand on the screen. I'm thinking, grab the wires behind the screen. You'll feel the power, But it's like nobody gets up on television and says, if you like to be hated, if you like enemies, put your hand on the screen. In other words, we are in a conflict. And so I just say to people that, that New Testament is what has kept me afloat. Not just kind of fumbling around and kind of what we do with the Bible is we kind of read our favorite verses and we cherry pick and we just randomly go there. It's like combing through it week in, month out. It puts it codifies it in your soul. So that's what I do. And I've been through a lot, but it's kept me going.
Okay, over here we have name question. Go for it.
Can I just say, love what you're doing. It is really amazing. We've used the God test a couple of times back on our campus, and something that we keep coming across is the subject of subjective truth. And so question 6 from the, I don't believe in God, speaks about, is there evil? And we've gotten responses like, well, there is subjective truth, and so everyone thinks what they're doing is right. Like, we've asked once, do you think what Hitler did is right? And we've gotten responses like, well, he thought it was right, so to him it was right. And so the concept of subjective truth, how do you answer that?
That's the short version is my truth. Nobody would say that when it comes to their bank account. Well, I thought I had money in there. Well, you may have to you, but we decided we have another ledger. Or you certainly don't want that with an MRI or a CAT scan. So it's easy to kind of live in a postmodern world where it's theoretically everybody's right. But you don't live there. You can't live there. It's not real. And so it's like truth, the definition of truth is it corresponds to reality. And it's also coherent. Our minds are wired by God for truth. That's why lie detector tests work. So Romans chapter 1 says people suppress the truth. It's like trying to take a beach ball and holding it under the water. And so the more people fight against objective truth, there's really a motive as to why they don't want to face that. And so they'll hide behind that. So I just say, there are objective truths. And if they would admit that there's anything that's wrong, or let's just put it this way, if there's something right or wrong everywhere, that points to a moral law that's above us all. And so no rational person will consistently or can consistently live in a world where everyone's right and everybody's truth is equally right. That just breaks down. We all can't be right. Somebody's wrong. Okay? I hope that helps.
Okay.
But usually when somebody gives me some kind of answer like that, I said, you can try to live in that postmodern house where, hey, I don't believe that I need a floor. You're going to need a floor. There's certain things that are going to have to happen. I see you coming here. One more question.
Just your name and your question.
Right. Thank you. So my name is Kajay. And my question is, it has to do with persons who believed in the faith at some point in their life, but somewhere along the line, after reading through the Bible, going to Sunday school or different sermons, they somehow stop believing. So when I would approach them and try and get them back on that straight and narrow path, and I try to be very wary of not coming off as redundant to them, because they've already gone through the Bible. They believe that they know everything there is to know about the Bible, and they still somehow reject it. How do you approach someone like that?
That's a good question. What we'll do is we'll take a break. We'll dismiss everybody. We'll hang around here as long as we can. Any time limit on how long we stay in this room? I'd say we'll just break that down, but it's so subjective. I mean, I listened to somebody's story and to figure out what it is. Somebody hurt them. Somebody did something wrong. I mean, it just comes down to, again, the asking questions of what can you pinpoint was the reason why you abandoned your faith. And if I can find out why, then I can address and help them discover that probably wasn't a good enough reason. So people who have known what is true and either not been able to do it or someone else has broken God's law and offended them, then many times people just take that and they extrapolate that to say, everybody, I thought all Christians were hypocrites. And that meant it only took one to prove that was wrong. And I met one guy in my accounting class at Mississippi State, and that one dude completely overturned my notion that all of this is fake, because I met one that wasn't. And so that's what my charge is that you got a lot of people that have a lot of reasons to reject Christ. Don't be one of those reasons, because all it takes is one of us, one person, to make that kind of impact. Let me pray for you as we go. Let's stand up together. Father, thank you for Joe and Addison and their great presentation today, for all the leaders that are here, for this moment together in all of these meetings that we're having. I pray that these precious ones would be able to digest this. Give them wisdom to take all that they're hearing and to process it properly. That number one, they'll come out of here loving you more dearly and walking with you more closely. And that you'll give them wisdom of how to know what the next steps are, so that they can begin to engage friends, family, others, strangers with this message of the gospel. We give you praise. Amen.